Hello and welcome to Snide's Return, a tabletop roleplay podcast. My guest today has been turning destinies into realities in both the real and fantasy worlds. No matter where the die is cast, be it a realm of dread, an ethereal place, or classrooms around the world, he knows just how important the journey, the opportunity, and on occasion, the roll of a die can be, offering to us and those who need it most a safe place to keep each other. Not a fortress of solitude, but a meeting place to look out over the world together, to hold what is dear to us, and learn what more we can be beyond our borders, both real and imagined. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome D&D content creator, educator, and director of operations for Shanti Bhavan, Ajit George. Ajit, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, a real boon for me, as it were. So, how did you get into tabletop role-playing games, I suppose, is the first question I really have to ask.
Yeah, sure. I started in tabletop role-playing games when I was probably in first or second grade. My mom brought home the old school red box for D&D, and that was, just sort of, it hooked me. I was so strange and weird, something so different than I had ever experienced before. And that started my, I think, lifelong interest in role-playing games and in fantasy in general.
All right. So picking up from where you started with the red box and moving on, how did your relationship develop with TTRPGs to where you are today?
For the longest time, I was just a player or a hobbyist. I enjoyed playing in various games. My high school game was very formative. I played for 4 years, from freshman year to the end of senior year. I loved it. Played in college, played in after college. But then I walked away from role-playing games for a while for a variety of reasons. And only about 10 years ago did I get back into it. And when I came back into it 10 years ago, I started to write for tabletop games too. And that was a new experience, but an exciting one, particularly because at the same time, I was thinking about and asking questions about the absence of people of color in tabletop games. I started to, I think I was a little older and I was a little bit more cognizant that I wasn't seeing myself in the books, in the games, in the material. I mean, I knew that even in high school, like it was pretty obvious, but I think at high school at that time, it was so normalized for me not to see myself in media that I didn't really think about it in any other context besides that. But now, I mean, I think about 10 years ago, I was very much like, hey, I don't see myself in games, and I want to talk about that, and I want to say that it is important for me to visualize myself in media in different forms. And so I started talking about it, and I started writing. I started getting invitations to write for indie games. And that led me eventually to writing for Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. And of course, being the creator, co-lead, and writer on Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel.
Yeah, amazing. So, sort of stepping on through the indie projects, is there any you want to shout out that you've been able to write for and sort of publicize before we sort of move on to this monolith, this Goliath of an IP that is Dungeons and Dragons?
Sure. I mean, I have good friends over at Monte Cook Games. Really appreciate their opportunities to work with them. I had a lot of fun writing for Bully Pulpit, and The Warren was a specific game I worked on. Misspent Youth for Burning Wheel Headquarters, I wrote for that as well. So a number of others like that, but I've had really just good experiences in the indie field by and large, and really appreciate the support from the indie community.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So, you mentioned there your good self writing for Van Richten's Guide for Ravenloft, and then now co-leading and writing for Journey Through the Radiant Citadel. So, very different settings. You mentioned in a few other interviews, I've sort of scoured and gone through some various things that there are parallels, but they are still different. So, what has it been like? One, what was it like helping to craft the Ravenloft within the Van Richten's Guide? What was that experience like?
That was a dream come true. I grew up with Ravenloft. I I played it a ton. It holds a powerful place in my imagination. I think in a lot of us who played for D&D for a long time, Ravenloft was very important. And it was exciting, particularly to be able to write Indian inspired material as an Indian writer for the first time in D&D. And it's hard to explain how it feels like to have something that feels like your own, and that comes from your heritage and in your culture. Um, and also, it was intense and stressful too, because I was like, man, so like I really hope I do this right, and that Indians who read this appreciate it and like what they see of themselves in it, and that the rest of the world also feels like this is exciting and new and engaging. So it was a rush. It was super exciting. I loved it. It was an honor to be able to write for Ravenloft and to create new material for Ravenloft.
Mm.
The domain that I wrote, both the domain and the mini domain I wrote, are brand new to Ravenloft. So that was a powerful experience for me.
And sort of, it mentions in the journey through the Radiant Citadel using the mists of Ravenloft to help link these two realms. So the realm of dread, as it is, and this, I'll make sure I say it correctly, the deep ethereal plane that the Citadel resides in. Where in this sort of transition between the two did you sort of draw the most inspiration from? What really, you mentioned your culture and heritage and wanting to excite everybody, I guess, but what is it that really sort of sparked the imagination in you as you sort of moved into this and co-led this project?
Yeah, I mean, to answer, I think the first part of your question, I think the Radiant Citadel is in some ways a response or a oppositional force to the domains of dread. Players are drawn into the mess of Ravenloft, of the domains of dread, against their will. They can try to outrun the mists, and I guess it depends on the DM deciding whether they can get away or not. But the mists of Ravenloft encompasses and captures, the PCs and brings them into the domains of dread. In opposition to that is almost the light of the Auroral Diamond, which is the center of the Radiant Citadel, and it guides people willingly, only if they want to, but it guides people willingly to the Radiant Citadel, and when they're in need, when they're hopeless and in need. So they're really thematically oppositional, and of course, having written for both, there was a reason for that. Those two pieces are almost counterpoints to each other.
Mm.
As to the second part of your question, well, that's a huge question in terms of how I felt. It was the greatest creative honor of my life. I have never done a creative project of this scope and magnitude before. It was over 2 years of my life. It meant the world to me to be able to write for that book and to create that book. The entire vision for Journeys to the Radiant Citadel was mine, always in collaboration with my co-lead, Wes Snyder. But he gave me a lot of control in the creative elements or the vision elements of it. And he was very focused on the D&D specific elements of it, the mechanics and the structures that made sure that it abided by what is canon 5e. And so to be able to create the first book written entirely by people of color in the 50 years of D&D's history, with the kind of cultural impact that D&D has, because you see it everywhere in some form or the other these days, right? You have there's tons of video games in development or have come out. There's obviously television shows inspired by it. Reference so many pop culture references. There's going to be, I think, an actual D&D TV show coming out as well. The movie, of course, and so on and so forth. To be able to be part of that in such a significant way was a bit overwhelming and just an amazing feeling much of the time. So I loved it. I was deeply honored to do it. It meant the world to me, and I think it meant the world to all of the writers who worked on it.
Yeah, speaking of the writers, some established names, but also some amazing new, or I would say new to myself, and I would hazard a guess to many others, new creative writers for people to fall in love with, and the worlds, the cultures, and environments that they created for us to play, to open up into our sandboxes, and so what was it like bringing together this team?
Yeah. I mean, I think the team was a rock star team of a lot of hidden talents that weren't well known in the circles, and I think partially because one of the things is that we're very drawn by streamers and influencers and like bigger names that are in those circles, and they've served such an incredible and important part of the gaming scene. Right, they are our ambassadors
Hmm.
for books. They're the ones that entertain us, and they're the ones who kind of make us aware of all the cool stuff in RPGs. But the side effect of that is a lot of great writers don't always get the same kind of attention or limelight as streamers and influencers. But the writers are the ones who actually build those books and design those games, and they're. I scoured for a while for some of the best talents that were kind of hidden away. Looked at a lot of what they had published or worked on. Sometimes just on the Patron or their on Drive Through RPG or DM's Guild, and just kind of looked at it. And in collaboration with Wes Snyder, we pulled together a list. I mean, I came up with a list, and he would check their work to make sure that he felt that they were ready for it. And we were in agreement with everybody and brought them on. And for all of them, I think it was an enormous honor and also an incredible weight, a sense of
Hmm.
real responsibility to get this right for the D&D community and all the fans and all the readers and all the players, as well as from the people from the POC community, other people of color who weren't ever going to get a chance to write on this book and who were not, who've been waiting for something like this. We
Hmm.
knew that we owed them to do our best on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the quality of work generated and compiled and given to us, game masters, dungeon masters, players, is phenomenal. And I'm going to ask a potentially tricky question. Of the worlds that have been created and given to us within the book or the adventures, do you have a personal favorite?
No, I don't. I think there's a lot of you know I think there's no personal favorite because I think they all have a lot to offer in different ways, and
Hmm.
they're quite quite extraordinary. I think if I were to say ones that surprised me, there's a couple of them that were really had a twist. I think that I was not expecting, and Shadow of the Sun is one of them. And Shadow of the
Okay.
Sun, it takes place in Akran Sangar, a city ruled by a Solar, so an angel rules city.
Hmm.
And I think what was exciting about this adventure is, in theory, it sounds like it would be great to live in a city ruled by an angel. In practicality, maybe it's not the greatest if you are a good person but don't agree with the ideology of that angel. And so the opposing faction, and there's two factions that the players can engage with. The opposing faction is also good, and I don't think I've ever seen a D&D adventure before where the players are pitted against two good factions that are in
Hmm.
direct opposition with each other because of ideological differences. And I thought that was really fascinating to me. Another one is Between Tangled Roots, and that really struck me hard because it was a very interesting take on the after effects of colonization.
Hmm.
Colonizers were gone; they'd left hundreds of years ago, but the after effects, the impact of colonization had made deep wounds on the people and the land, and that actually is the catalyst for the adventure.
Hmm.
And the ending is very poignant, and the big bad of the adventure is not maybe as big bad as people think, and that the preferable answer to it is to not maybe to kill the big bad.
Okay. Well, there you go. If you haven't read into the journey through the Radiant Citadel, then that one will certainly inspire, to say the least. And this book is tailored for playing groups from level 1 through level 14.
That's
When,
correct.
which opens up so much, so many player options, so many um, sort of opportunities for groups to try new things as they either play them sequentially or as one shots, as has been mentioned in other interviews and reviews of the book. When do you get the chance to play D&D at the moment? I realize you're very busy all the time, but do you get a chance to play? There's a follow-on question to this.
Yeah, I do. I haven't played. The funny thing is, because I've been writing so much, I haven't played as much as I would have loved. But I definitely get a chance to play.
So, with this book offering such a broad spectrum of levels, where do you like to play? Where do you like to pitch your characters and games when you get the chance to play?
I usually try to do with home games. I don't like playing online. My own personal preference. I think I just grew up playing in person, and that's what I enjoy the most. Um, and so I love to do it with friends locally around the table as much as I can.
And so character choices. I'm digging into you here. To be fair, I love
Sure.
finding out about people's home games. So, do you have a current character you're playing at the moment? What kind of character and level are you at the moment?
I don't have one regularly at the moment. There's actually a session zero coming up on Saturday, so I think we're going to start a new campaign with a few
Nice.
friends, and I haven't thought about what we're going to do, but we're going to play Beyond the Witchlight, and looking forward to trying that campaign.
Yeah, there's so much fantastic content currently out and coming with things like Spelljammer being officially confirmed and things like that. Um, Outside of, and you mentioned a great affinity and love for Ravenloft, are there other settings that you enjoy that you like to draw inspiration from as well?
Um, in terms of D&D specific, I would say, Sigil and Planescape have had a very strong influence on me. I love it. It's always been funny when people have compared, Sigil and Planescape to the Radiant Citadel, because I felt like the two cities are deeply, deeply different. And I
Hmm.
was very hyper aware about not making them similar, but also I pay homage and respect to the work for Planescape, and I really love it. I also find Dark Sun very interesting, not for the brutality of it and all of the awfulness of it, but I think in another way it is oppositional to the Radiant Citadel and the utopian nature of Radiant Citadel hopefulness. I find there's some really interesting themes of ecological disaster versus ecological paradise, and the solar punk and hope punk that Radiant Citadel embodies in Dark Sun. And so Dark Sun's really interesting to me, and I'd love to have an opportunity to work on that if possible.
Well, here's hoping, touch wood, and all those sort of good things. The stars aligning, and all those sorts of good things that chance materializes. And you mentioned there Sigil and not wanting to pay homage, but not copy or sort of step on the toes. The Concord jewels sort of add that ability to move between the various sort of ethereal places and planes and things, which, while not directly like Sigil, offers the opportunity for DMs to spread out or even come into a central hub. Uh, how has it been trying to sort of tie all these potential story threads together to form this narrative around such a hub that the Radiant Citadel is?
Yeah, the Radiant Citadel was designed very much as a hub city, but with a limited amount of locations. Right, 27 total. 15 that are written in game, 12 that are missing. They can only go to the prime material, the material plane. So there's very specific limitations. Unlike Sigil, they can't go to every plane possible. And
Mm.
unlike Sigil, like the Concord jewels, they float in this almost constellation, like starlight constellation around the city, and they can be imperiled. They could be destroyed potentially, or something could
Ooh.
happen to them. They can be deactivated. There's a lot of interesting risks and problems associated around that, which I think offers for some really fascinating role play opportunity. Very different from the portals of Sigil. I think Sigil, you go through a portal, right? You find a portal and you go through it, in the end of the story. And there's not a lot of conversation around the portal, and the portal can
Mm.
take you anywhere. And I like the fact that you can potentially go anywhere in Sigil. But on the other hand, I also find really interesting story play opportunities when you have limitations in where you can go,
Mm.
right? That
Hmm.
forces a narrowing of the story and a greater focus on the places you can go in, as opposed to like, oh my God, I can go everywhere. I sometimes find myself in a supermarket being overwhelmed by the glut of choices.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
standing there and there's like 50 peanut butters in front of you. And like, which one do I want? And I think narrowing choices creates a powerful narrative design that leads players in a very specific way, and you tell very specific stories.
Mm.
So I really enjoy that. In terms of tying in the stories together, I think it's an anthology of adventures, but I also think it can so that you can pick and choose any of those adventures, and we actually give a write up about how you can drop this adventure in your homebrew, how you can drop this in Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance or wherever you want it to
Mm.
do it. But simultaneously, you can really sew together a full-fledged campaign and play from the first adventure to the last adventure. And I think it'd be a very fulfilling campaign. And that would really rotate around the Radiant Citadel and the key individuals and factions in there, from being sent on missions from the Court of Whispers or by the Dawn Incarnates, right? The Dawn Incarnates themselves, that these repositories of wisdom and knowledge that are kind of like this like amalgamation of spirits. Maybe you can be sent on a quest or a mission from them, or the speakers of the ancestors, who are the rulers of the Radiant Citadel, maybe on them,
Mm.
or the Shield Bearers, which is kind of a I always think of them as sort of D&D special forces where they get dropped into hotspots, the worst situations, and they've got to go solve these problems with very specific rules of engagement. So I believe there's a whole full-fledged campaign that can be built around, the Radiant Citadel, and it would be a very fulfilling campaign. And it would just take a little bit of like planning and thoughtfulness from the DM to achieve.
Yeah, I get the impression you mentioned special ops. I was thinking the way you described them, the shield bearers, more like UN peacekeepers almost. So
Yeah,
go in there, disaster relief or situation de-escalation and that kind of thing that could add a different dynamic to conflict.
yeah. I don't think of them. I've seen the UN peacekeeper analogy, and I think that that's a great one, and I think that's definitely a different angle on them. I um, I think often because they're not there to interfere with local government, the peacekeepers in the UN peacekeepers have often struck me as forces that are trying to stop two warring factions from fighting and create like a demilitarized zone or
Mm.
prevent further violence in the region. And they can be used for relief efforts for sure. But actually, the shield bearers are not really there for relief efforts specifically, nor are they there to like stop warring factions from fighting each other. They're really meant there to like evacuate civilians and those who are imperiled from
Mm.
danger, and they can only protect themselves if attacked first. And so I think those kind of scenarios are very tough, right? You're going into the most dangerous situations possible because the shield bearers
Mm.
are sent into like extreme danger. They're not allowed to attack unless attacked first, and they can't really change local conditions. They're not allowed to like prevent the natural disaster or to stop military incursions, right?
Mm.
And so, who would survive that kind of situation? Well, only the most badass of adventurers and the toughest of the tough were going to
Mm.
have that. And I think the shield bearers actually have a high casualty rate, and so they're a really interesting faction because of the complex social challenges they face,
Mm.
and if you could join the shield bearers, I guess, and break those rules of engagement, then you'll get yourself kicked out of the shield bearers, and or cause a lot of problems. So let's say you
Yeah.
were sent on this mission, and the Radiant Citadel breaks the neutrality. Maybe that means another force attacks them afterwards.
Yeah, that's. I mean, the stories write themselves, and maybe not used in the way that the shield bearers are potentially, as you mentioned, potentially there to get in and evacuate. But there is potential there for GMs and DMs and players to sort of play out the what ifs, even if it's a one shot or a sidebar to a different campaign. You've got my mind spinning. That's all. It's my mind is reeling. It's mile a minute. So much content to sort of pick and play with. The Dawn Incarnate. I love the fact that they sort of bond and grow from single crystals and become these entities of wisdom and insight. And rather than being disconnected, you're able to approach them as groups. How is it? been to sort of provide these almost sage-like characters or creations to DMs and players to actually interact with, rather than being off the page or unspoken.
Yeah, I think what is interesting about the Dawn Incarnates for me is they're different from what we think of a Western or European style look at how knowledge is passed on. We often think about the library, the musty library, the ancient library that's hidden in the ruins or on the top of a mountain or wherever, and players like are excited to go through the scrolls and read the knowledge in there. But ultimately, there's a lot of excitement about it, but there ends up being kind of like an info dump or a lore dump, right? And then you get there and then you read the information and then you go to the next step in your quest. I think the couple of things that are really interesting with the Dawn Incarnates is first, they speak about the oral traditions that a lot of other cultures that are non-Western cultures that have really, had for centuries. India had an oral tradition of passing on knowledge for many centuries. I know parts of Africa and Latin America as well, and I see quite a bit of the world has had a very strong tradition of oral knowledge passed on by elders and the wise to the next generation. And so I really love that because that's what the Dawn Incarnates kind of represent. Secondarily, I think they represent another point of interaction on play, right? So you aren't just going to go to the Dawn Incarnate and get an info dump. You're actually going to be interacting with this spirit amalgamation that has its own desires and wants, and may give you the information in the form of a parable or a poem, or a riddle, or maybe they will ask you to do a quest for them before they give the information you want. Simultaneously, because the Dawn Incarnates, and the other smaller incarnates in there are made of dozens or thousands of small gems that hold the different spirits, spirits of ancestors as well as spirits of the land. Those individual spirits have their own story. And so maybe you have a spirit of an old woman, who died centuries ago, and she was dying on her deathbed, and she never got to see her children before she died, and she wants you now to go find out what happened to her family line. And I think you're going to create a very poignant story around that. And as a DM, very thoughtfully recite, the voice of this old woman who comes to the surface and is now present and kind of speaking their needs, or a man who died in war and had never gotten back home to tell his wife and his kids that he loved them, and he wants you to go, to find his old sword that's on the battlefield somewhere, and then bring it back to the descendants of his family, or to put it in the family tomb, or whatever. Simultaneously, there could be a spirit of a grove, of a forest, and that forest has been destroyed and lost, and they want you to go replant trees in that dead land and rebuild that forest. I think there is so many rich potential story opportunities here, well beyond finding a book or a scroll in a dusty library.
Yeah, I could tell that you're the writer out of the two of us, because you sold that in beautifully.
Thank you.
So if you haven't already raced over to your friendly local gaming store or D&D Beyond or wherever it is you pick up your copy, go and buy. And while I mentioned this before, I sort of segue on to the next thing. Ajit, where can we find you and everything you're associated with online, please?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest place to find me is on Twitter. I am most active there. I am Ajit George, SB on Twitter. And so you can also just Google my name. Ajit was AJIT, Ajit George. And then you'll immediately find probably my website, and my Twitter handle, and other things. But I'm most active on Twitter, and I'm talking often about games on Twitter. Sometimes I'm talking about Shanti Bhavan and my work there as well on Twitter. And so that's the most easy place to find me. If you want to contact me about work opportunities or collaboration, usually going through my website is preferable, though my DMs are open on Twitter too, so I'm open to that as well.
All right. Well, I will make sure links for your Twitter and your website are in the description below this podcast. I'll also put a D&D Beyond link for the Radiant Citadel as well, which you can pick up in your friendly local gaming store as long as they have it in stock and it's not been sold out by everyone rushing out and just buying this amazing book.
I think if you can get a physical copy as well, I mean, like I think online copies are fantastic, especially for online play. And so D&D Beyond or Roll20 or any of those platforms are fantastic to access. But the physical copy is so gorgeous, especially the variant cover. I think the variant cover as a whole, with the cover and the pages, is the most beautiful D&D book I have ever seen in my life. And I know that sounds incredibly biased, but it is absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous. And I think it's worth picking up. I think it's capturing a little piece of history. I think there's something. It is a historic book for many reasons. You know, that they're all written by POCs, and 50 POCs worked on it in some capacity as editors and consultants and so on and so forth. Artists, art directors, so on. I think there's something great about having that piece of history as a physical object. So it's worth it.
That it's nice to have to put post-it notes or memo tabs in so you can find the sections and all that sort of stuff. I like the tactile feel of a book, so that they would probably be a payday purchase, which would have already happened by the time you listen to this episode. So hopefully it'll be coming through the post by now. We mentioned there the Dawn Incarnate and passing on information and education through the ages, and that's very much something you're tied to in your work away from tabletop role-playing games with Shanti Bhavan. You are the director of operations. I'll make sure I get the correct
I am the
title.
director of operations for the international nonprofit, the Shanti Bhavan Children's Project.
Which, if you haven't checked it out, there's a documentary on Netflix. I'm not going to put a link to that because I'm just going to tell you go and watch it. So your work, your time, your experiences with Shanti Bhavan, please, there's too many questions and I don't want to undersell it. Please tell us about that experience and your work.
On the Netflix series?
No, just for Shanti Bhavan. It's just great that there's a Netflix series for people to watch.
Sure, yeah. I've been the director of operations for the Shanti Bhavan Children's Project since 2008. And I can say honestly, it is the most fulfilling thing I have ever done in my life. It is, I think, not just my work or even my profession. It is my life's calling. I think many of us struggle to find meaning in our daily life and why are we here and what are we doing? And I think some of our ills in life is our answer to that is to buy as many objects to fill our life with. I think doing things that are deeply meaningful is a better answer to that. And I think the greatest opportunity in doing something meaningful is maybe to contribute positively to others, whether it's putting new art into the world by the form of books or games or whatever we may do, or by doing work that may be positively impacting the lives of others. And that can be through volunteering or part-time activities, or in my case, I'm very lucky to be doing it as my profession. So it has been an incredible experience to work with the underprivileged in India, children from the poorest communities and the most discriminated communities in India, making less than $2 a day, and give them a high quality education from the age of 4 until they graduate from high school, and then help them get scholarships and support them through college as well. And so it's radically transformed their lives, and they're now in these amazing what we call the professional jobs, and changing their own personal lives, but changing the lives of their families and their communities as well.
It's incredible work that you do, and there is an opportunity if those listening can do so. There is the opportunity to support. There's an opportunity to volunteer as well, but there's an opportunity to support all the amazing work you do, and it's not. It is spreading worldwide, from my understanding from the website.
That's correct. We have a new chapter in the UK that just opened up. We've had previous chapters. We have previous chapters in Italy and in Germany and Canada, and I think we're going to have a UK chapter. An Australian chapter pretty soon. We're also building a second school in India. So we have one school operational right now, and we plan to have a second one operational by 2024.
Wow. So how, digging slightly into your personal life here, but how do you split your time between where you are in the Pacific Northwest and across with Shanti Bhavan?
Yeah, I spend about 4 months of the year in India. 2 months in the Jan Feb kind of period, and another 2 months around now. In fact, you've caught me right before I am planning to fly out to India for
Mm.
close to 2 months. So I'll be gone from August 1st through the end of September, and it's very important to be on the ground at the school, working with the kids and working with the administration and teams there. Simultaneously, I am, you know, I run operations in my teams in the U.S. as well, and so going back and forth is really effective. And I'm married to a wonderful woman, Whitney Strix-Balpan, who is a narrative director on a AAA D&D video game, and obviously she doesn't want me gone for too long. Or she comes and visits while I'm in India too.
That's amazing. The fact that you're able to have support at home and through your work is so important, and I am just in awe of everything that you do, because that is all I can do is support it, and I guess that's something, and something is better than nothing.
I appreciate that. No, it's. I think supporting in any way that people can, if they want to come and donate on the website, or they're interested in looking at volunteer opportunities, or getting involved with the UK chapter if they're listening in the UK, or wherever you might be. There's many ways to help or get involved, or get involved with a different organization that you believe in and trust, and they're doing good work. I think you're just really it's about believing in a community and believing that you want to be a positive member of that community, whatever that
Mm.
community may look like for you.
Yeah, 100%. So between 4 months of the year, sort of away working with this incredible cause, back in the Pacific Northwest working on TTRPG content, do you get such a thing as down? Do you have you time? Do you get downtime? We mentioned in playing a game possibly a little earlier in the interview, but you get time for you and your family?
I haven't recently. To be very honest, it's been running a little bit ragged, and that's been pretty tough. And I've certainly hit a level of like exhaustion and a bit of burnout. Um, it I'm not really taking on a lot more projects. I'm kind of trying to wind down. I have a couple other things on the side. I'm trying to wind those down and kind of just leave a lot of open space for myself to just maybe enjoy time and enjoy normal activities that are not some form of work. Even creative work is still work, and it does take a toll. So I think I'm going to try to take it a little easy for a couple months. Though to be honest, I have a creative project in the back burner that I'm kind of dying to get on, but it's more a personal project, and so I can take that at a little bit at my own pace as opposed to having a very tough and grueling deadline to work
Yeah. So if you were to have some free time, and I realize that's a big
on.
if,
Sure.
is there anything you would sort of how would you, with the exception of the creative project you just mentioned, is there anything else that you would look to do or get involved in to maybe sort of just relax and have time for you and explore other interests maybe?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, man. Because beyond the creative stuff, I also do a lot of mentoring for people of color, especially people of color who are trying to get into the games industry. And I've been trying to give them guidance and support and open some doors for them so that they can enter the industry and put their own creative works in there as
Mm.
well, and kind of contribute to the greater whole of the community. But for myself, in terms of personal time, I love reading. I love spending time with my wife on adventures, maybe traveling and doing things together. Those are the things that I think that are important. Or just be watching a television show. I haven't watched even that much TV recently, and wouldn't mind just kind of sitting on the couch and kind of chilling out a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. I'm gonna and apologies for people listening, but there is two pieces of incredible artwork, one over each shoulder that I can see in your screen. Uh, where are they from?
Yeah, it's a Bombay artist by the name of Abhishek. I think it's Abhishek Singh is his name, and he's a Bombay-based artist that I ran across his work by accident at the very beginning of the pandemic, and absolutely loved it. And so, purchased these prints online and had them sent across, and they're incredibly gorgeous. I think he works in themes of Hindu, mythology, but
Mm.
with his own vibrant takes of them. And so I really have really grown to love his work, and we've got like 5 pieces of his artwork around the home.
well, if you can find, I obviously not going to take a screenshot of your home. That's invasion of privacy. I'm not here for. But if I can find a link or something, because the artwork is beautiful. I just had to mention it because it's been catching my eye while we've been talking and sort of filtering in and feeding my excitement, shall we say?
Yeah,
So
his name is Abhishek Singh. He's relatively easy, I think, to find his artwork. In video interviews with me, you could actually probably do see a screenshot of it because it is in the background all the time. I'm trying to figure out what his Twitter handle is because he's got a Twitter handle, but he sells his work online, and so it's relatively easy to pick it up, and his work is pretty remarkable.
I would agree with that statement. Moving back onto track, as it were, we've covered quite a lot, various topics and things. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned so far that you want to bring up towards the end of the interview, Ajit?
No, I really appreciate talking to you. I think I really encourage people to check out Journeys through the Radiant Citadel and find it as a celebration of expanding their creative outlets and their imagination. I have played D&D since I was a little kid and loved it deeply. But D&D has also been influenced by, I think, just a handful of uh, writers. Tolkien being a big one, but I think you've got a little bit of Conan in there, and you got a little bit of Elric in there, and you've got pieces of different elements that have been influenced in a very specific, strongly European base of creativity. And I'm always surprised when people only can imagine fantasy and gaming in that context because. This is literally a creative, outlet. This is the place where our imagination should go and explore all options and to really break back barriers and to not be locked into a few very simple themes, but that we realize that D&D can be so much more. And I hope people pick up that book and see how much more D&D can be, and that it doesn't take away from what exists already, but it expands and adds to what our gaming experience is. And so I hope they get a chance to check it out. The other thing is, this is just a thing that I love, and I'm going to be at is the other game that I loved since I was a kid was World of Darkness. Big World of Darkness player, and there's a vampire LARP called Saturnalia in New Orleans this November. Really high quality LARP, one of those kind of blockbuster LARPs where they're putting high production value. There's part of it's going to be in a vampire bar, some part of it's going to be in a steamboat, part of it's going to be in the same kind of mansion that they filmed part of Interview with the Vampire, the new television series that was the trailer just dropped a few days ago. Wow. Part of it's going to be in that same very same house, and they've got locations all across New Orleans, all across the French Quarter. I think it's going to be extraordinary. It's a 2-day event, and I strongly recommend people check it out. You can look at a website at vampirelarp.com. I am not one of the organizers or otherwise involved, except I'm just a player. I bought tickets for it, love it. My wife and I are both going, and I think it's just going to be an extraordinary event.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a line of inquiry for another interview in the future. For sure.
Yeah, maybe I can hop back after I'm finished, or maybe you can talk to the organizers of the event and ask them what they think about it, because they put a lot of care and effort into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of future interviews, Ajit, I'd love to get you back in the future for follow-up interviews if time schedules and all those sort of good things allow as future releases and things come through, and more support for creators of color and all those sort of really good things that are happening in the community right now. If you'd be willing to join me again in the future,
I'd be happy to. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you so much for your support and belief in our work.
No, not at all. So just before we go, to make sure that we can sort of continue to push people towards and help support your work, would you like to remind everybody where they can find you and everything you're associated with, please?
Yeah, sure. The easiest place is to find me on Twitter, and that's my first name, Ajit, and my last name, George, SB. So Ajit George SB is my Twitter handle. You can find my website, which is Ajit A. George, and you can just also Google my name, and I think I will quickly pop up My website, my Twitter will quickly pop up, so you can check that out and it'll be easy to find me.
All right. Well, links, as previously mentioned, will be down in the description below this podcast. Ajit, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about the show, then go to www.snydersreturn.squarespace.com. Alternatively, you can find us over on Twitter @ReturnSnyder. We have a Linktree link in the description of this episode. And if you want to support us, come and join